I'm so honored and proud to be here, and thank you to those who participated in today's activities, from those who marched and formed the parade, to those who gave the gift of food or simply their time, so that someone who otherwise couldn't be here could be. To those who graciously provided vehicles, to the wonderful music provided by our bands of Bourne and Wareham, and having left many others out, last but not least, the committee and over 100 people who put this program together. I was in charge of the weather, by the way, just as an aside. Many of my words and memories today are not only mine, but those of others, past presidents, historians, military scholars, and my grandfather. This day, of course, marks the anniversary of the end of World War I. It coincides with other parts of the world, where today is heralded as Armistice Day and Remembrance Day. Major hostilities of World War I were formally ended at the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, much as we're doing today. Veterans Day is set aside to remember every man and woman who served and donned a uniform, and in many cases taken up arms to defend this country. We honor every soldier, sailor, airman, marine, Coast Guardsman, reservist, National Guardsman, and nurse, who gave some of the best years of their lives to the service of the United States of America. Over 25 million veterans walk among us on this day. These are the hidden heroes of a peaceful nation, our colleagues, our friends, our classmates, our neighbors, and our family members who answered the call, some drafted, some enlisted, and returned to the land they defended. As always, far too many were lost on the battlefield and buried where they fought the fight. I mentioned nurses a moment ago, and I think today they deserve considerable mention. World War II was the largest and most violent armed conflict in the history of mankind. However, the half-century that now separates us from that conflict has taken its toll on our collective knowledge of the tremendous manpower that faced our nation. The Army Nurse Corps listed fewer than 1,000 nurses on December 7th, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor. Before its conclusion in December of 1946, a mere 5 years later, 59,000 American nurses served in the Army Nurse Corps, often under fire in the fields of war and evacuation hospitals, trains, ships, and medical transport planes. The skill and dedication of these nurses contributed to the extremely low post-mortality rate among American forces in every theater of the war. Today we honor them and we thank them. Several generations and many diverse backgrounds remember the swift conflict of the Persian Gulf War. The heat of Vietnam and the bitter cold of Korea. The mountains of Afghanistan and the beaches of Normandy. My grandfather served in the Army during World War I, and 20 years later re-enlisted in the Navy and served as a Seabee in World War II. The members of our armed forces continue to define this nation. Our nation values freedom, not just for ourselves, but for all. We are the greatest force for good in the entire world. No other nation in the history of the world has buried its soldiers farther from its native soil than America, or buried them closer to the towns they were born and brought up in. 2,261. This is a number that I ask you to remember today and carry into the future with you. a number that this town can be very proud of. Over the last 269 years, of the 275 that this town is going to celebrate next year, 2,261 citizens of the town of Wareham have stood ready to give life itself in the defense of this nation. This wonderful community continues to be there when needed for both the nation and its citizens. I'm so happy and satisfied to have been able to call this town my home and its people my family. It is with a great amount of admiration and pride that I have been able to be with all of you for this time of remembrance. In the words of a past president, peace fails when we forget what we stand for. The veterans in this day will and should continue to remind all of us what this country stands for. Were it not for them, we would not be the nation we are all fortunate to be living in today. May God bless our veterans, their families, and this wonderful town. And may God continue to bless our great nation. Thank you.